Good morning. Um, Thank you very much for joining us today. I'd just like to let you know that we are recording this session. So please just know that it is being recorded. If you don't like it, please do message us and we can work out a few things. So we're going to give it just a couple of minutes for a few more people to come in. We see that people are still filtering through, and we're expecting a few more people than what we have now. So thank you very much for joining us today. This is the 2024 SFMI Audit Review and Report launch. And of course, we will have the awards as well. So I'm seeing we're still having more people coming in for a few more of these. I hope everyone's well today and warm enough. We do have a pretty packed agenda. So I see that we're still getting more people in. And let me Right, we're still having more people join us. Welcome to the people that have joined us. We'd just like to repeat that we are recording today's session. Please do feel free to go into the chat and especially to ask questions and answers. We will have Q&A at the end. So any questions that do pop up, please do put them in the Q&A and we will have the full panel today available for speaking at the end for the Q&A. And yeah, it's great. It's great to see a lot of names here that I don't get to see very often. So welcome to a number of names that are new to me, and also some of our old friends and colleagues that we have. Shall I make a start then? Right, so welcome to the 2024 SFMI Report Launch and Awards Program. This is a really exciting time for us now because we can certainly say that, as you can see from the title, the FM leaders are really reaching the point where sustainability is paying. And this is a major theme that's come out in our assessment program this year. And as the years progressed, is that we're seeing sustainability is really starting to pay and coming into its own in some commercialization aspects. So if we'll just we'll move forward now and just have a look at the agenda. I'm having a little bit of an issue on the. Great, thank you. So as you can see, we have a fairly packed agenda today, and this reflects the trends in the industry is going through, and we are, as I said, really celebrating reaching the point where sustainability pays. And we've seen real evidence of commercialization in our sustainability success stories in this one. So very quickly here, we'll go over an overview of 2024, and then we'll move straight into ESG materiality. This is coming from Sunil Shah, so it's going to cover some very good high-level progress that we're seeing. Then we're going to look at some findings from this year's SFMI audits program, a little bit of the results from the scores in a general sense. And building on that, we're going to be and then we'll be moving to one of the things that's really important here is the Scope 3 research program. A number of you have already been members and taking it to this point, and we're able to start to move into the next phase now, and with new colleagues joining us to do that as well. Of course, one of the most important aspects for the SFMI is the opportunity to show recognition for progress and for good performance. We're doing that in the awards section. And then we do have time, hopefully, to cover some questions and comments from yourselves. Please do keep sending questions into us and we'll check them at the end. And just a reminder that we are now being recorded. So just a quick introduction to the speakers. Sunil Shah is Managing Director of Aclaro Advisory and the SFMI. I think that you will also remember Chris Havers, who's worked with the SFMI for a number of years. He also joins us today as Director of Aclaro and working inside SFMI as well. Myself, Brenda Sullivan, I've been with the SFMI for 3 years now, and I'm very happy to announce that we now have a new colleague, Kristen Mirjetsky, and she is, you'll be seeing an awful lot of her as she's going to be handling the Scope 3 research program moving forward on this one. So very, very welcome from each of us to each of you. So this is just a reminder, please do have questions and answers throughout the webinar, and we are being recorded. So for the overview, we'll just spend a couple of seconds. There we go. I think a lot of you already know a lot of these things. The SFMI exists to drive leadership within the FM industry, especially in ESG. And this is in order to help deliver the sustainable services, and that's across the value chain. So there's a couple of things that's important that I like to bring up is that we are the only one focusing on sustainability within FM, and the only ones that have this audit program for this one. A few things to look at as well. It is the only place really within the industry that allows companies to identify how they can compare and how they can improve against their peers. For the overall UK FM market, about 20% already by revenues is in the SFMI, and that's a conservative figure. We know that seems to have gone up this year. We also know that Scope 3, which is critical, but somehow still seems to be lagging. Amongst our partners, 78% of them have already started on that. And again, that's a conservative figure. But what's not a conservative figure is we know that 100% of the partners surveyed would recommend SFMI partnership to other FM organizations, something we're proud of and something we very much appreciate from each of you. So just a couple of things that we have done regularly and will continue to do. So we do have regular regulatory updates. So we are able to send you information monthly, and every quarter we're looking at focusing on FM specific regulatory guidance on this one. We also ran a consultation exercise this year to update the criteria. And this is one of the focuses in getting everyone prepared for the new regs as we go forward, and those changes coming through. And one of the big aspects for this is this Scope 3 Phase 3 is now kicking off. You'll hear more about this later. That's going to be a global program for this one, building on a lot of the hard work that each of you have given this year. And we're continuing to update with engagement, involvement. We've had more leader forums, some special guest speakers as well. So definitely please ask if you're interested in more of those, if you want to see some of the information coming from those. Sorry. We very much like to thank all of our partners, and we see logos here, and we'd very much like to thank as well our partners who are not specifically FM providers, and 3 of which are the IWFM, IEMA, still IEMA, and RICS on this one. So we will send these slides, but we just like to bring through, we do have some of these quotes about the SFMI having been a transformative experience for its members. And we'd like to thank the partners as well as all the other members here who do support the changes and the progress that we're making in the industry. This is just as a reminder as well that the SFMI is not just for audits, and it's not just for the Scope 3 program, which of course is a very important development moving forward. We also have materials, thought leadership pieces, and guidance as well. So this is a small summary of the materials that we have available. Please do ask if you've missed any of these. If you can't find them on our website, just give us an email, and we're happy to provide these to each of you for the public. And just a small activity update from 2024. So now, as you know, the assessments of the 23 criteria across all of our partners has been completed. Please do be prepared for your scorecard presentations. These are going to be coming through in the next few weeks on this one. If you've not booked, please do book now. We've also done this consultation on FM readiness, and this has looked at the regs and some frameworks. A lot of that has informed the changes this year's program and activities that we'll be doing. So the Scope 3 emissions project, you'll hear more about this from our experts later. I'd just like to say that you will know that we've completed phase 1 and 2. Many of you have attended the roundtable we had in June. Now we're looking at Scope 3 emissions in the phase 3 of this. So this is going to be about the necessary strategies on this one. So it's launching in February, and now is the time to get involved and get into that program. Horizon scanning, as we mentioned, we've had the first issue already at the end of Q3. We're looking for the next quarterly is likely to be January 7th. So please do look out for that one. And as we've mentioned, we do have leaders forums. This year we had a special for the ISSB, Mr. Mike Zimoni, who is one of the people that helped push that forward. We've had diversity, we've done consultation, and we've also done the criteria changes. And now today, results of the reports and the awards coming through. And I would like to turn over now to Sunil Shah, who is our Managing Director, for the industry overview. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Brenda, for that really good overview as well. I'm now going to talk just as a quick overview of what's happened in 2024, not just in the FM sector, but also more broadly as well for the built environment sector and some of the pressures that are also coming through from outside. So one of the big reports that came out fairly recently, so this was a couple of weeks ago, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development produced a report. This involved a huge amount of research around the world, and it's starting to talk about nature positive buildings. But what it went through was the impacts that the built environment sector has overall around the ecology and around societal impacts as well, on top of the carbon and the energy impacts as well that we all understand. And its outputs are the built environment is responsible for 30% of biodiversity loss, 50% of global raw material extraction, and 40% of CO2 emissions. So a lot of this is about the materials, where they come from, how they're managed and how they're handled. Some of the recommendations coming in there are some very simple areas. It's about thinking about the forward elements of the building, the operational side of the building when you're at the design stage, which is an area that we've probably mentioned for about the last 20 years as well. But understanding the operational pieces around then what's the impacts that's going to come from any project areas, from any refurbishments that might need to take place, and the sourcing of those individual items as well, but also any potential wastage, reuse of those materials and so on. So there's a large part of this then flows through in a lot of the areas that we talk about with the SFMI, but is also an increasing area from a regulatory side where biodiversity is being spoken about for the property sector. And whilst a lot of FMs will say we don't really have a big impact upon biodiversity, what we are looking at this is the whole life cycle, which means it is where do those materials come from, how are they manufactured to get to how you're going to use them. So again, these will be areas which will come through from a regulatory regime, but will also start to filter through later. On top of all of that, half the population of the planet has been involved in country level elections this year. And that's been really good as an understanding of what global perceptions are, where individuals are within their own individual countries. Interestingly, we've not seen a huge movement one way or the other in the way that the population is choosing electorates. Some are moving very much towards populist regime. Others are taking forward more regimes which do look at climate change and do bed that in as part of their policies. So we're still in a mixed view in terms of how individual countries are now addressing some of these challenges. However, the climate issue and a lot of the other challenges are still continuing. Drought level conditions, we've had significant flooding, we've had terrible events in Spain recently. Yesterday, half the train network, it appeared, was shut down because of flooding that had taken place in the UK. So we have a lot of these time by time issues which are starting to appear, but they're appearing on a greater regularity, and the impacts that it's having is also increasing. 2024 is comfortably above the 1.5 degrees C threshold, which the Paris Agreement has been talking about. And July the 22nd was the warmest day on record. So since records began, that's hit over 1.7 degrees above. So we're getting towards these sorts of temperatures which 10 years ago we were seeing as being thresholds and points of no return. They're now becoming quite common that we're breaching them on an irregular basis, but we're still breaching those thresholds. Regulations continued. We've continued with the consolidation of the regulatory regime. We've increased the level of coordination and the interoperability which exists between all of those individual regulations as well. And the overall intent is to be able to reduce the burden on business from that. So a better understanding, building into the business operations and the business strategy enables you to have an easier mechanism of being able to implement and meet compliance. What that also allows us to do, though, is it improves on coordination, it improves on our ability of being able to work in partnership with others, but it also helps us to shine a light on who the leaders are, but also who the laggards are. So it becomes a lot clearer about those that are talking but not necessarily doing, and those that may not be promoting all the good work which they are undertaking. But what's also been clear for 2024 is that sustainability and carbon we've seen as being dropping down the agenda. So the various CEO reviews and analysis that takes place has seen the economic constraints, the cost of living, as becoming a priority and as becoming the number one issue that both individuals and organisations are tackling. But what that also says is that sustainability is still being treated as an add-on. A lot of these issues that we're seeing, the economic constraints, are driven very much by some of the climate change impacts that we're seeing. Coffee prices have hit the highest price ever for the futures market. So that means we know that the price of coffee next year will be a lot more than the price of coffee this year. That is a direct impact then upon how much you pay for your cup of coffee or how much you pay for your granules and so on, which increases inflation. We're starting to see exactly the same issues with a lot of the fruit and vegetables as well. We're starting to see the same impacts upon materials that are coming through. So all of that also increases the prices on day-to-day living. So it's about how do we also have a conversation that a lot of these individual changes are all interlinked together, and to be able to understand the impacts, the implications, they need to be built into the operations of the business and the forward-looking pricing mechanisms as well for the business. So those are some of the challenges which we're starting to see this year, and we're going to expect to continue into next year as well. So there's a really good report that was written by Grant Thornton, and I've mentioned them here and liberally used some of the information. Again, what it talks about is some of the challenges that are in place for this survey. It's the mid-sized businesses, but I think it affects a huge number of organisations, not just in the UK, but globally as well. So it's about the speed of change which is taking place. And I mentioned about the consolidation of the regulations. That in itself is going to speed up the change in the regulations, the new regulation standards coming through, because we no longer have a multitude that organisations need to tackle with. There is just one or two or three that we need to look at, and all three of those are talking to each other and building out some of these future areas. So the change that we're seeing now is going to also be the change that we're going to be seeing into the future. We don't have the ability of being able to kick the can down the road for 6 months or 12 months and to pick it up, because the agenda will have moved on again. There are challenges around capital investments, and part of that is about access to the capital, but it's also about how we put forward the business case to be able to move forwards. And again, there's an element of being able to look into the future and being able to manage what some of those forward implications will be. And the different jurisdictions as well, and how we manage between Europe and the UK, between the US and Europe, is also becoming ever wider. But there is a mechanism and mean of how we be able to manage those different regulatory regimes. The regimes themselves is about how do we make organisations better? How do we enable businesses to better understand their risks and opportunities so that they can thrive? So that's the purpose of a lot of the regulations. So in that sense, we shouldn't be viewing this as being a negative to implement those requirements. It should be a positive and a differentiator for how we move forwards. So the forward trajectory and some of these elements that we're looking to build into 2025 and beyond. I've spoken in the past about moving from a target that's set, lots of targets being set early on in this decade, now starting to come through to fruition, 2025 to 2030. There's now an increasing requirement to put some meat on the bones, so transition plans. So moving from what we're going to do to how we're going to achieve it, and more depth being added so that it provides credibility to the targets that are being set. We're also going to start to see both customers, organisations who have set those targets now requiring their supply chain to act to achieve those targets as well. So the SBTi has targets set around supplier engagements for their own supply chain to achieve accreditation to SBTi. So we're starting to see that flow through that says, as a major organisation, if you have accreditation to SBTi, you'll want your key suppliers to also achieve it. And if they haven't, then you'll be looking to change that supplier and move towards a new one. So there's the movement of the supply chain needing to act to support their organisations, their customers. Same way applies with the European and the UK regulations, which applies across the supply chain activity. And again, it's about having that openness, particularly on things like human capital as well. And a lot of the tone of this, the presentation, the report this year, is talking about value to organisations rather than talking about cost. So it's no longer a concept of savings and avoidance. It's a concept of the value that's being provided, not just to the organisations, but to other stakeholders as well. That requires not just an education for the FM sector, it's also an education for organisations as well, who need to change their perception of how they view property, of how they view the FM service. And for all of that, it's about how do we implement this as part of the procurement and supply chain system. And the procurement system is fundamentally broken. It doesn't allow for a lot of these mechanisms and areas to progress, for value to be offered as a differentiator, and for promotion of these concepts. So how do we rework and revise that system so that we do and we are getting the best out of what the FM service can offer? So I'll also start talking about a piece of work that we've been looking at around materiality for the FM sector. And this comes from the regulatory changes which are coming through, both the European regulations, the CSRD, and also the forthcoming UK regulations, which is the ISSB. So both of those two are starting to talk about materiality. And what we mean by that is, how do we know what's important for us and how do we focus upon those individual areas? There's a linkage within that to the TCFD disclosures, which have been in place since 2022 for large organisations, and also the SECR, which has been in place since towards the end of last decade. Both of those two, again, are starting to talk about disclosures, but it's about what's important and how do we move the needle on the changes. One on energy consumption, one on the risks for an organisation. So the regulation system is seen as being the base efforts. So I mentioned earlier on, the regulatory side of this is saying we want organisations to be better. If you can better understand what your stakeholders want, if you can better understand where your risks are, but also where your opportunities are, your business should be better. You should grow more tangibly. You should be able to reach new markets. You should be able to retain your staff. You should become a better business. And what McKinsey did was a review for the organisations that have conducted materiality assessments and understood what that means for them. They've seen a 4.7% uplift in growth rates for those businesses. So there's a tangible benefit that comes through from an organisation undertaking these materiality assessments and then building them out. And that fundamentally is what the regulations are about, is performing those assessments and then building them into the business. So the challenges that we still have within the FM sector is the same challenges that we've had for a very long time. There is short-term thinking that takes place. It is typically 1 to 2 years. We might be looking slightly longer term ahead, but certainly no more than a medium term, 3 to 5 year horizon at most. And that affects an awful lot of these areas where we might be starting to talk about 10-year, 15-year horizons on change activities. There is still a reliance upon labour. Yes, we do have lots of technology that takes place, but to make the technology work, you still need lots of labour and people that are involved. So we've seen what some of the other sectors can operate and how they deliver. The move and the change from Rolls-Royce engines on aircraft, where they're able to take data points as it's in flight, make fixes to the engine whilst it's in flight, and where there are any tweaks that are needed, as the plane lands, you have the right engineers there to make the changes so the plane can take off again. We have that technology to do exactly the same with an awful lot of the equipment and the kits within a building, to be able to make those changes without physically needing to go into the building itself. So how do we start to build those items in? So the materiality element that we're looking at is both a combination of the impact and also the financial materiality. And both of these, we talk about this in terms of double materiality, is they both help each other to understand what you're going to do, but also what its implications are. So how does it impact you? How does it impact your stakeholders? What's the risks, the opportunities, and then be able to build them out. So the example that we have of the impact materiality is we have greenhouse gas emissions. We've measured our scope 1, our scope 2, scope 3, and we've got a program there to be able to reduce it because we understand what they are. So that's great for a few people, but what does that actually mean for an organisation? How do you get that conversation towards the senior exec? So the financial materiality of that is then starting to talk about what does that mean for the organisation today, but also for the future of that business. So we could have carbon pricing mechanisms that come through, which will become an additional tax on the business, which the organisation needs to be aware of. We may also have some client losses which might take place, or customer losses, because the carbon emissions, the GHG emissions are high, and we don't have accreditation to SBTi, which means that we don't have access to certain tenders, bids that are coming out, whether it's from an FM provision or whether it's an organisational provision as well. So those elements will then have a financial impact upon the organisation. And it's those elements that will start to be able to gear a change in the thinking for the business. So the consideration here isn't just the business, but it is those other stakeholders as well. It's looking at the investors, it's looking at the other stakeholders, business partners, the NGOs, the customers, the supply chain, as well as part of this, to understand how individuals will be affected, how organisations will be affected, but also the flip side of that is where's the benefit that comes from that. So the steps, the programme, the process that takes place, this is the mechanisms that the SFMI and Aclara Advisory take when we're looking at double materiality. And it is based upon initially understanding the context of the organisation, who you are. So that means you can ring fence around a business unit, around a country operation, or around a customer activity. We then start to look at this as what the impacts are, understanding their importance, and then starting to look at the governance. So that means, how do we build this into day-to-day operations and activities from the strategic, the operational supply chain areas, so that it forms part of business as usual, but also that helps us to achieve what McKinsey had as that 4.7% growth. So when we look at this for the FM sector, and we look at it for the activities that the service provides, we've got these three key activities. So under Greenhouse Gas Reporting Transition Plan, under Wellbeing, and under Social Value. So under GHG, very much around the transport issues with large fleets that are taking place, whether that's directly under control or under supply chain activities. And then also within the scope 3, looking at things like the items which are being purchased, but also what's called sold services. So these are the services which are being provided by an organisation into another organisation. So typically they get forgotten about or not included, but they should be included simply because you have control over the emissions that are taking place, the way that those activities are being performed. Under wellbeing, we look at this not just for the employees, but also wellbeing for the supply chain, and also starting to look at wellbeing for customers as well. And within social value, we're looking at it not just from an employment and a community perspective, but also broadening that out in terms of the property and what the property's view is and how we can enhance and utilise the property from a social value perspective. So building that out slightly further, we've been looking at how do we provide a measure and how do we understand what each of these material issues are and look at what good practice is for each of these areas. So we've used the terminology of whether it's a financial materiality or an impact materiality and assigned details around that. So areas around greenhouse gas reporting is both a financial and an impact, whereas items such as wellbeing at the minute is more impact based. We don't yet have a level where we can have a clear financial mechanism to be able to measure and define that. And then a series of KPIs as well, which we're starting to look at to measure as well for consistency in the approach that's taken place. So we've put this out there. I've written an article within the IFM magazine, and we're starting to look at developing the concept of the materiality, the KPIs out towards 2025. And the intention is to start to include this as part of a sectoral approach for the FM sector within the regulatory reporting from 2026 and 2027. That provides us with a consistency of the KPIs, the impacts, the measures that the FM sector has taken, but also a demonstration of the value that comes through. The final linkage part of all of this is that risk and opportunity at the bottom, where we do look at some of these forward opportunities that are in place, but managing those risks, and how do we able to look at that beyond that 1 to 2, 3 year horizon, and instead look at it as a minimum of 5 years upwards of what those impacts would be. Thank you. I'm now going to hand back over to Brenda to go through the SFMI findings.
Thank you, Sunil. That was really interesting, and to see the four groupings and the themes that come through, I think it is something that's really setting us up for the rest of today's discussion. So just a little bit reminder on the SFMI assessments program here, and I will go through a lot of the findings that we've gotten from this year's audits. I won't go through every single slide. And in fact, you will find more information, not only in the slides we send you, but especially in the report. You'll get a link to the report for later today. And this is where we really are able to discuss the results and a lot more of the impacts than what we'll be going through here in this one. So this particular slide, I really want to remind everyone that the SFMI assessments program is evidence-based and it's interactive. It's not a tick box exercise. It's not something that you can self-declare. So we go through a three-stage process. There's the initial assessment with all the knowledge that we have and we can put together. We then have in-depth interviews, and this is everyone from your CEO down to people who may be operational levels in specific areas. And we ask an awful lot of questions. We're scoring on a 0 to 5, and we do ask an awful lot of questions. And we have about 340 questions in our arsenal to ask any particular person that comes through the audit program. And this is just amongst the 23 criteria that we are looking at. We do organize this through the ESG lens. We've listed here just a couple of the, just to bring out a few of the criteria. So out of the 23 criteria, you can see environment looks at not only the energy, where people have really been focusing, but things like water and circular economy that haven't been getting as much information, as much attention. You will also, of course, know that there's an awful lot of overlap and interaction between these. Sustainability as a holistic exercise, and ESG is just one of the lenses. So sustainability frameworks is not in the environment side, it's actually over in our governance side. There's financial in governance, but it very much will impact back onto the management systems, and certainly into the health and safety. So every one of these interacts with others in there. And it can't be done any other way. A few changes this year. It's been 5 years since we made major changes. We do absolutely change and update every year. This year we ran the consultation. We asked our own experts as well, and we made some changes which were more significant than we have done for 5 years. And these fell into a certain number of themes. I'm going to bring out double materiality, and that is absolutely critical in the changes now and in the approach moving forward. We've also, of course, talked about the transport. Data is a really big issue that's needs to really be handled from the top down. Board commitment is quite important. We've put that through this year. Well-being and absolutely supply chain management. So that is for human rights and for environment. And that's a constant theme that we've been seeing already coming up in today's session. And I think we're going to continue to see this as we move forward. So just building on some of the things that Sunil said, when we did all the audits, we were able to see four main themes coming up in this one. And it very much was fitting in with what Sunil was talking about for the materiality side. So the material issues that we're looking at are falling into decarbonization. This is a really big aspect, and it cuts across not just the environment side, but it does cut through some of the other sides. And this commercialization aspect that we're seeing in this one, sustainability really pays, is being seen in some pretty big decarbonization programs that are going on now. Well-being, people have been doing this for a while. We're really starting to see this one starting to pay. The results are coming back. The social value, the measurements that we're now seeing coming through in this one are coming in and showing a real value in this, and value across the business and across the value chain. And all of these taken together helps define the other theme of risks and opportunities. And this is where there are risks and there are opportunities, but each of the risks is a way, it can be a springboard to move things forward for an organization, commercialization, etc. So these are themes that you'll see as we talk through this. There's some very interesting things. The SFMI has been going on since 2013, and we have really solid evidence that we've been looking at recently for long-term trends that we have in the 23 criteria across all the partners and all the years. And we just want to hone in a little bit on this evolution of trends more recently. So there's been some changes in 2019 and 2020, and since 2020, we've been able to see some real changes, and it shows up in the data, it shows up in the programs that our partners are putting together. So we talked about the obstacles to sustainability, and there was a need in 2020 and into 21 for upskilling and really getting to grips with these things. So we then moved forward into 2022. We were able to see that understanding was beginning to grow and people were engaging with sustainability in more of a holistic way. It wasn't quite so siloed in organizations. 2023, we were seeing that deepening. We were starting to see improvements coming through and structured improvements and structural improvements as well in organizations, some changes in partners and who they were doing business with as well. And now in 2024, we're really starting to see good, strong evidence of the commercialization of these and the sustainability initiatives, which are high value, both commercialization for the external and also internal with good value that can be measured as we go through. So I'd just like to have a start. The first theme is decarbonization, and underlying this is turning your ambitions into opportunities. With this one, there's a few things, and we've highlighted them here, that really have stood out in these. One is this very important aspect of empowering leadership for the change. This is the upskilling, the building the competencies at leadership, not only at the board level, but through each of the operational levels as well. Building innovative carbon services, not only for yourselves, but that can be commercialized and shared with your clients and also with supply chain. And that brings us up that the supply chain and supply chain engagement becomes very key for this one. And it is a way to find opportunities and start to move some of these things forward. So you see a graph here, which is the data for decarbonization. And we've used this particular cluster: energy, transport, and supply chain management. And you will see on this graph that we had some relatively high scores. These are total points for the average scores until about 2019. And that's when regulations and societal demands started to change a lot. So in 2020, we did have some changes made to our question base, and we started to see our partners grappling with these issues in a slightly different way. And that retrenchment in the scores is actually where the seeds were planted for all the changes that we're now starting to see. If you notice to the far right-hand side in 2024, this is the highest score we've seen yet for decarbonization. So this real movement from 2020, where there were the bar was raised. We've seen a little bit of movement into 22 and 23, and then this year in 2024, it really is starting to flower. So I'm just going to bring up two of the specifics in this one. Energy scores. An awful lot of people in FM are working on energy, and we are finally starting to see this. It's the third highest increase we've seen this year in all of our criteria, and the scores themselves were up 13% this year. That's just an average score moving up 13%. And this is in very large part with the credible zero carbon strategies that our top FM providers are now offering themselves and for clients, publicly disclosing their emissions. The measurements are getting better refined as well. And also very important in this one is the top providers are engaging their stakeholders. This is engaging the clients and engaging the suppliers. They're looking at carbon reduction, and they're also looking at behavior change activities. And the commercial relationships we've seen include energy audits, performance gaps being addressed and highlighted, efficiencies and resilience coming through. Also within decarbonization, supply chain management is actually not as high a score on this one. This to me means there's still quite a lot of potential coming in this one. So it was only a 5% increase in the supply chain management criteria. And I would just, we can't ignore that it is absolutely a key pillar in improving anything in Scope 3. Any net zero plan is going to have to include smart and savvy ways of doing supply chain management. So we'd just like to say that one of the challenges is ensuring that the ESG considerations are going to go deeper in the supply chain. So first is we're in the early stages of influencing suppliers. And then we know coming towards us is this new challenge that the considerations are going to have to go deeper in supply chain to your tier 2 and tier 3. And there are a number of commercial opportunities in this one. We're seeing some people starting to take advantage of this one, but we can see from the scores that we know that there's more potential coming through, and supply chain management is going to be opening that out. So well-being, and this is one that actually takes a number of different things. We've just tagged it as the value of doing what's right. And we hear that from a number of our partners as well, as doing what's right. But this, not only doing what's right, but it's tangible commercial benefits are coming through from this one. We're starting to see those realized and measured. There's a few different ways of looking at this. Again, it's this ensuring the leadership commitment coming through into well-being on this one. There's also connecting well-being with other sustainability initiatives. This is a little bit uneven right now. And then the tackling the key challenges with well-being. So we've come through a period where we had skill shortages for a number of years. That's being improved and fixed, and partly with well-being initiatives. And the main aspect that we came through with this one is being bold. The FM providers who went bold early and really started to work this through the whole organization are starting to see their payoffs now in very measurable ways. So this just shows us a similar chart that we talked about for the decarb. You see the peak in this 2019 and 20, and now we've come back to a position of strength with the highest score that we've seen in this cluster for 5 years. And it's really important to appreciate where this has come from. So improved staff health, fewer illnesses and absences, all of these are measurable, fewer accidents, better retention, better recruitment. And that's what we're seeing with the SFMI partners, and especially our leaders, are now being seen as attractive and forward-thinking FM providers. And we all know it's a very competitive industry. So this turns into a commercial advantage, is to have these advantages and measurements in the well-being program. Again, we'll just do a couple of highlights on this one. Diversity. We've done a leaders forum earlier this year on diversity, EDI, DEI. But the well-being scores in this cluster are absolutely led by diversity. Diversity is our most improved criteria this year across all 23, and it's over 17% higher than it was last year. So this is really starting to see all the attention paying off in terms of the maturity of some of the programs internally, and also then having those commercial benefits coming through and sharing things with clients and even with suppliers and supply chains as well. With this one, we found that board sponsorship is a key driver for success, and that matches with other research that the SFMI has done in the past about board sponsorship, board commitment, and governance leading across all of the scores as far as making improvements and things. Disclosures have improved, but we still see some lags in the targets and plans. So there's still potential for this to be moving higher, even though it has come through at 17%. So we know that the targets and plans and the measurements are one of the aspects that helps turn this into some commercial benefits of this. So health and safety, also a big score inside the diversity cluster, even though it was only up 7%. Part of that is because it was at a relatively high level of scoring on average to start with. But even in health and safety, we're not all done. We've seen another almost 7% on this one. And one of the things that I like is the breadth of the things that have come through in health and safety. So we are seeing good examples from our partners of prioritizing things like sleep, neurodivergence, menopause, and even blood pressure issues are being addressed. They are well-being, and this is where they're linking up into the health and safety. So we talked about well-being going across the criteria and across the functions. Absolutely, we're seeing higher engagement, the fewer accidents and absences we've talked about are supporting commercial benefits for the partners themselves. And just a reminder is that the successful programs that our partners are putting into place are helping them see examples that they can then start to develop into commercial offerings that they can start to share with their value chain all the way through. The well-being criteria itself, and not to confuse this, but there is this cluster, and we have one very particular well-being criteria, is it did make very good gains, 11%, but they're still lagging in the social criteria. And we can talk about this more in depth. There's also more in the report on this one that you will see. So if we move on, social value, and this also is turning purpose into profit. This is a very interesting one. I think everyone understands social value and it being part of our purpose. What people haven't been aware of so much in the past is social value also contributing to profit. And that's one of the interesting aspects this year to reinforce this idea that sustainability is really paying now, is that social value, part of sustainability, is actually starting to pay. So we've just highlighted here a few things. Upskilling the teams is a very important aspect of delivering social value. And it's also a very important way of delivering social value in the contracts, but also to have the contracts with your own supply chain and clients working in a much better way. So something in social value absolutely is able to drive commercial value as well. Getting a lot of data across contracts and delivering it. This comes down to our measurements. We'll talk about that a little bit. Partnerships and collaborations. We've seen some very interesting partnering with non-traditional partners coming through in social value programs with very good results, and very good results that do end up with measurable benefits in this one. And the tracking is probably one of the keys on the social value on what we're coming through. So again, we're seeing this dip in 20 and 21, and then a strong gain this year in this cluster coming through back to the levels in 2019 before we had quite so many rules and regulations and societal demands on this one. So sustainable communities is sharing the top place inside this cluster with employee development. This is quite an interesting one. So for the scores themselves, the sustainable communities, not a big surprise that if you're looking at social value, and employee development, both at the top. So we're seeing improved communications coming through in this one, which has really helped. And as we've mentioned before, the partnering with non-traditional stakeholders. So when you start to look at social value, really taking this out into the community, into the local neighborhoods, but also a little bit more of the lateral thinking has really started to pay off with some strong benefits for a few of our partners this year, and we have some great examples of that. Again, you'll be able to read more about these details in the report, which you'll be able to see this afternoon. One of the really important aspects of this is being able to integrate the measurements and getting this enhanced reporting. That really does lead to better decisions and more focused results on this one. And we would encourage everyone to really start to look at some of the examples we're giving on the measurements, which does become very important all the way through this one. So we talked about as well employee development at the top, training and the skills. We know it's increasing retention. We're also seeing it increasing innovation. So the more our people get trained and the more skills, it also seems to help them bring together different parts of the organization and their own information that they have. You still need to know what the material topics are for your organization. It's absolutely key to know what you're going to be needing and what your employees need as well, is that materiality comes through even in something like this. But it is great to see that there's mobility for the employee coming through. And we've talked about where we used to have a skills shortage in the industry, that's now being handled quite a lot. And that does certainly enable commercial service offerings, and it certainly improves the resilience as well. Stakeholder engagement is one of the criteria that you'll see coming through, along with the supplier engagement, as an important aspect in so many of the initiatives that we have in sustainability. And this is absolutely key for materiality. So I'll just point out the bottom line is recognizing the materiality of all the stakeholders that you have and across the full value chain is one of the keys to discover the opportunities and the potential for commercial growth on that. So we've had quite a fast run through the three main themes that Sunil has highlighted for us, and we've given some of these examples. There will be more again in the report itself. So we look towards risks and opportunities, and this was one of the themes that came out when we examined all of the audit results and all of the assessments and all of the information that we had learned, is that it was really a different year this year because we were seeing a lot of the risks turning into the rewards. We were seeing clusters in the risks and opportunities, but very noticeable was how many of these were the opportunities and how much had been turned into commercial offerings, but also opportunities for the company itself to become stronger and more resilient. So with the conversations we've had before, we've taken a bit of advice, we have set up these clusters. We have a number of the risks highlighted here in the red line, and it's the same number of criteria in each of these clusters. So it's not just an artifact of the structure of this one. We really are seeing that the risks themselves have been scoring lower across all these years. What we've seen is the things that we have highlighted as opportunities have really strengthened this year. In fact, we've seen that, we've seen the opportunities progress twice as much as we've seen the risks. And that's a change this year. You can see from this graph, this is really a significant change, is being able to see the opportunities turning into commercial benefits from this one. So we'd just like to look a little bit about the risks. One of the main things that we're finding is the unaddressed climate risks are absolutely material. It's material for your compliance. It's for the resilience of the organization and the continuity of this one. So every little thing that we're talking about in nature is part of the climate risks, but of course there are many other aspects of climate risks as well across the whole ESG lens and criteria that we're using. Supply chain risks is one of the ones that stands out as not completely addressed yet. There's still potential to turn this major risk into some opportunities and into some commercial benefits as well. We just highlight there that it does impact your resilience, your financial stability. It can change your investor rating. It certainly can impact your service delivery. Very much a commercial risk on that one. Data is a continuing theme that we're finding is still holding back some of this reporting, but also holding back that decision making. So if we're talking about getting the best decisions and from the board, that decision making needs to come through. So the materiality assessments need to be strong and robust. And then we just like to come through to opportunities. Again, this cluster made twice as many gains as the risk cluster in this particular year. And the major aspects of this one is turning these into commercial opportunities, starting with your own organization and then moving it out into the value chain. Decarbonization of building services, decarbonization of the fleets. These are very significant areas, of course, in your operations. And these are things we're seeing gains in and seeing real benefits on this one. EDI initiatives, we've spoken about this. There's more information there. And also just want to bring up again, boards who do commit to the full sustainability and ESG, they're able to create conditions for better management. And that does figure very directly into materiality, into risk registers, into the ESRS preparation. And these are opportunities that we've seen the partners really embrace and move forward on, and it's starting to bring benefits to the industry itself as well. So as we've mentioned, all of these are going to be found inside the report. You will be able to download it later today and look at many more of these details and a lot of examples as well of what we've seen coming through for this one. So this, I hope, sets a good background to start talking about the Scope 3 project. And I'd like to introduce and hand this over to Kristen and to Chris to take us forward on this. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Brenda. That's a great pit stop tour of the report, and I think the report actually looks great as well, and I think it reads really well. So I would encourage everyone to drop in and jump on the website and download the report, because there's a lot of valuable information where Brenda's scratched the surface of it, so it's get involved. So keeping on the theme of risks and opportunity, we've spoken to audiences about our Scope 3 research project over the last couple of years, and now we're entering the exciting stage of launching our phase 3 of our project. So me and Kristen, our new colleague and new senior consultant at the organisation, are going to be giving you a little bit of information, just kind of reassociating you with the project, and then giving you some further information about how you could potentially be involved going forward. Also, I would recommend popping questions into the question box as well, if you have any from over the session, so we can have a Q&A at the end of this session. So I think, given the report's been speaking about commercialization, this has always been at the heart of how the SFMI has been trying to drive the industry. It's always been about trying to embed sustainability issues into not only the internal operations of a company, but also how it delivers that within the services to its customers, because we understand that FM's a very service-driven organization, very customer-orientated. So just kind of going back to the origins of the SFMI Scope 3 project, which was back in 2020, 2021 territory. There are a couple of reasons why we started this. Firstly was around the traditional view of the building life cycle, and how upfront construction related carbon was really the dominant talking point for the built environment and the carbon impact of the built environment. The operational carbon was only really considered when it came to the energy use of buildings and such. And so the SFMI saw that opportunity for the FM to stamp its impact on the built environment and really kind of push its reputation within the built environment and the building life cycle. We felt that there was a larger role to be played from the FM sector, and trying to drive the FM sector into this world of decarbonisation and showing the value and the commercial value that it has. We really wanted to try and determine whether there is more of an impact that buildings have when it comes to that operational use and that kind of 20-year lifespan of a building compared to the upfront carbon costs. But we knew that collecting the right data and engaging the right people within the built environment was really the crux of this issue. On top of this, again, we wanted the FM to really engage with its clients on the topic of decarbonisation and the topic of Scope 3 and measuring carbon, because we understood that there were revenue generating opportunities from this, and so we wanted this project to really kind of help organisations take forward the ability to engage with their client base on this. There's always been the level of there's always been a kind of a tiered approach from the FM industry, one that starts within the kind of the compliance driven tasks, and then going up the maturity ladder, you get those organizations who move beyond compliance and want to really kind of delve deeper because they understand the cost saving benefits and such. But then also you get those companies who go further than that, and want to generate revenue. They want to generate revenue from these opportunities as well. As we've heard today, the compliance level side of things is starting to eke up, but that just pushes the bar up for that foundation level. And really what this Scope 3 project is trying to do is get companies up that maturity level and get them into that revenue generating opportunities side of things. But obviously there are challenges, as with all walks of life, there are challenges to these things. Measuring consistency is a big one. Different businesses were always measuring their Scope 3 emissions and their engagement, their carbon impact when it comes to their dealing with clients. Oops, I realise I've not been taking my slides through. My apologies on that. Thank you very much. I think Jemima probably took control on that one. If you just pop onto the next slide. So then, yes, there are carbon consistency. There are measuring consistency issues where different businesses were measuring different boundaries. Sunil mentioned within the early stages around, the understanding of sold services as a Scope 3 concept. This was an area which wasn't really being delved into. And so this is an area that we wanted to look at to understand, is there a higher impact for Scope 3 measurement, which the FM industry isn't actually measuring. Then also you've got industry comparability, which is really going hand in hand with that measuring consistency. Different companies measuring in different ways meant that you're comparing apples to pears, or as in the diagram, apples to peaches. And so we've been unable to find, a benchmark for the industry because everyone's doing it in a slightly different way. Data quality is always an issue. Scope 3 emissions has a wide variety of data quality, and so improving that consistency again links to the previous two sections, and then upskilling as well. Organizations are struggling with the volume of work, and so if you can engage the wider business, you can bring more people in from the wider business into the understanding that this carbon issue has revenue generating opportunities. You can engage with senior management, and then you can bring in more people into this world to kind of relieve the pressure. Just pop to the next slide, and that brings opportunities through a wide array of opportunities. You can start to build enhanced relationships with clients because you're able to engage with your clients on what the impact of your services have from a carbon perspective, and that can link with their science-based targets, that can link with their net zero targets, it can engage with their values and such. You can gain a competitive edge on this as well because the more data that you're collecting, especially regarding those sold services, can then be utilized to find improvements and find efficiencies, and to help kind of push you above the competition. So then you're able to, improve the scope of your services for your with your clients. That also leads to innovative opportunities, and then also as regulations start to push up as well, you're fully prepared. And as we've seen since we launched stage 1, which I'll go into in a second, the bar for Scope 3 emissions is starting to move up from a regulatory perspective, but also from voluntary initiatives as well. For example, we've seen in the last 3 years, science-based targets taking a keen interest in the sold services remit, whereas three years ago, FM providers wouldn't have had to have provided information on sold services when applying for their SBTIs. And then obviously there are cost savings as well involved when you're able to find efficiencies which can be carbon related. So with all this kind of wrapped together, this is why we launched the Scope 3 program, which when we set it out back in 2020, 2021, we saw it as a 4-stage approach. The first stage, which was sponsored by BAM to help get us off the ground, was really setting that initial kind of concept. and then we work towards delivering a framework for the industry, which is essentially saying, okay, here are the here's how we recommend organizations measure their scope 3 emissions from a corporate perspective, but also if you're engaging with your customers, how you measure that from a customer by customer perspective, kind of contract by contract perspective, because that's where the value comes, is being able to do that one-to-one engagement. Stage 2, we brought in a wider group of organizations. So thanks to Optima, BAM, Skanska, and also Bouygues at the time, who are obviously now Equans. And there we helped to expand on the framework, but also started to try it really in earnest. And these organizations were the frontier, the pioneers of working on this program with us. And we were able to kind of tweak and change the initial framework, and then kind of bring it to the point today, and kind of really try it in earnest. And now what we're pushing on to do, and I'll be handing over to Kristen shortly, is to talk about stage 3. And this is where we're developing this online alpha tool, which we can use to really push out to the wider network, because the aim is not only to help individual companies push forward and gain that competitive advantage, but we're trying to create an industry collaboration approach, which is driving the whole industry forward and building on that reputation. So I will quickly dance through the next slides. We've had some great achievements to date. If we just pop onto the next slide after. So while we've launched the framework, we've got organizations testing it. You know, this framework has been recognized, for example, by the UK GBC, who have actually integrated it into their embodied carbon scope 3 measurement reporting. We were able to help RICS expand the whole life carbon assessment to go beyond that measurement of just energy consumption and water consumption in the operational phase. And so now organizations can use our framework and link, have kind of a link between the whole life carbon assessment. And then the IWFM was also promoted it significantly across the FM industry. And they're kind of really driving forward and promoting scope 3 measurement within the industry. So Kristen, in the interest of time, I'm going to hand over to you now, where you can take us through stage 3, which we're ready to launch now.
Great, thank you, Chris. Thanks for the overview and the background. So just to introduce myself, I'm Kristen Mierzejewski, and I recently started at Aclara, and I'm going to be leading on the next stage of the Scope 3 project. So I'll just very quickly go over what this stage of the project will entail. So Chris has already gone over the timeline of this project, and we're now in stage 3, which aims to build on our learnings from the previous 2 stages and develop a data tool to generate insights into Scope 3 emissions in the FM sector, and also to generate emissions factors. And this will help companies gather their Scope 3 data, benchmark themselves against the industry, and identify market opportunities. So the aims of this project. So the final stage of this project will look to embed this framework in our, we're looking to develop this online sophisticated tool with a third-party data partner. And this will give users the ability to measure their customer emissions and gather valuable insights from the data and enhance their business value. And through the valued input of our partners and the wider FM industry, we'll be able to provide metadata insights that will provide users with benchmarking of their service level carbon against the industry, which can help inform their net zero pathway. So this will allow partners to engage with their clients and determine their areas for improvement. This metadata will then allow us to build up FM specific emissions factors that can be used by the industry to drive operational efficiency. So finally, we will continue to input into initiatives such as the whole life building assessments and try to embed Scope 3 FM reporting into the built environment. So why join? So we're currently looking to recruit partners to be involved in the development of this Scope 3 tool. This stage will last approximately a year, and we're looking to launch in February of 2025. So partners will be able to use their experience and specific needs to help tailor the tool and to help them better understand their emissions and engage with their clients on sustainability, benchmark their business, and identify market opportunities. This stage will also help upskill partners to help understand their Scope 3 emissions and equip their team to capture and analyze their Scope 3 data, aligned with RICS standards, as Chris was speaking about earlier, strengthening their decision-making across the business. This will give partners a competitive edge, allowing them to understand how to enhance their performance, make efficiencies, and help meet client needs. So finally, this stage will also include activities to showcase our research and data and engage with the wider built environment industry to help embed our learnings into global frameworks. So partners will be able to position themselves as sustainability leaders and demonstrate their value to clients. So if you'd like to get engaged with this stage of the project, please feel free to reach out to myself or to Chris. As I mentioned, we're looking to launch in the next few months. So we are currently having conversations with different FM providers to get them involved in the project. So
Brilliant.
thank you.
I think I get the award for the techno numpty not being able to manage my slides. So I think that means I need to buy the Christmas drinks now for the party in a couple of weeks' time. Brenda, I think we're going over to you now, aren't we? As we get towards the awards presentations.
Yes, so I'd just like everyone to note that Kristen's email address is still on the screen, and Chris's you probably already know. So we'd just like to make sure that you have the ability. So I'm the next one, Chris, on the text system. So this is one of my favorite parts of the SFMI, and I'm still waiting for the system to catch up with my keyboard. And that's where we take all the information that we've learned through all the audits and through interactions with everyone, and we start to move these things forward into actual awards and recognition. So we are celebrating, of course, this year where we are seeing that sustainability really pays, but we are also able to celebrate accomplishments that we see in the FM providers and some of the top ones. So I won't move the screen forward yet, just to make sure that everyone has the same surprise. We're first going to be looking at the Rising Star. So for Rising Star, this is usually an award given to a company who may be starting out on their journey or who may have been in it for a while and has made some significant difference in their own performances as they go through. So for the Rising Star this year, we are very, very pleased to award this to Churchill Group. This is the Rising Star Award for 2024. Congratulations, Churchill. You may remember that this is actually the second year for Churchill being a Rising Star, but this is still evidence of the progress and the commitment on their sustainability journey. They had strong improvements in the environment and in the social sections of this one, as some of the notes. And they're also having progress in embedding things into contracts. So we're seeing that commercialization starting to come through for Churchill, and congratulations to Churchill for this part of the journey and for all of the work that you've done for the FM industry. So for the next one, we would like to look at the platinum winners. Now, the platinum winners, these are going to show up in alphabetical order. We've seen our partners making progress each year, and we absolutely celebrate these accomplishments. This year, this criteria standards were tightened, but we still managed to see rises in a number of scores and across a number of criteria for this one. So for our platinum winners, and again, we're still waiting for the technology, we need a drum roll, I think. So again, in alphabetical order for these, we want to very much congratulate and thank to all the hard work to BAM FM, to Equans, good year on this one, to Mighty. Again, thank you very much personally. Skanska, love to see you again as a platinum winner. And Vinci, congratulations on being a platinum winner as well. So now we would just like, as the SFMI, we'd like to give another award for the winner. And this is always a challenge, and it's always a pleasure to talk about the winners in this one. So we have talked about the criteria have gotten tougher. There's a lot more challenges out there, but this year we've seen a lot of great examples in our partners, and they've been building on their successes. So we've talked about the scores have been moving higher this year as well. Progress in so many areas. So for this year, we're happy to recognize, actually, we have joint winners this year, and we would like to congratulate as joint winners both Mighty and Vinci. It's unusual that we have two winners in a year for a lot, but both of these companies have shown us so many great examples and great initiatives where they're pushing their sustainability throughout their organizations and also out into the more positive environment that we can see. So we've seen this across governance, other parts of the ESG as well. Some very, very impressive initiatives and results. And again, congratulations to our joint winners, Mighty and Vinci. Very well done. And thank you for your efforts. So I'd like to just, with all the congratulations having been said for now, and you will find it in the report as well, which you will get the link to later today. I'd just like to invite my other colleagues onto the panel. Sunil, I think you may be guiding us in this panel and some closing comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brenda. And congratulations to Mighty, Vinci, and also Churchill. Huge amounts of effort that's gone in, and it's not just a 1 year thing. This is over a number of years of progression and development into the business and the business operations as well. So congratulations to those three organisations for the awards, and then congratulations to all the other platinum and the gold and the silver winners as well. So we've got a few minutes left for some questions. Again, please do keep the questions coming through. There's a couple of questions which I wanted to ask as well to the team. So one was around the Scope 3 activities, and one of the comments that came through from the surveys that have taken place is around the challenges of Scope 3 data and collection, the time it takes, the difficulty that's associated with Scope 3. So we've been involved in the Scope 3 research on supporting and helping organisations, providing advice and guidance. Can I just ask the panel in terms of how would you support, what's your recommendations for an organisation, either who's starting out or has got a high level overview of their Scope 3 activities? What would you suggest for their conversation, either directly or with their senior management team, to progress and start to collect more meaningful Scope 3 information?
Yeah, I guess I'll kick off on this. And so, I mean, firstly, it's important to stress the Scope 3 process is an iterative one. I think it's very rare for an organization to go from 0 to 100 and have perfect amounts of Scope 3 data within their first year. But there are core benefits to be expanding your data quality and understanding on your Scope 3. I mean, the first would be around understanding the risk within the supply chain, for example, creating kind of carbon hotspots and such, where you're able to determine where your key focus is going to be on. So if you're getting pressure from your customers, for example, to start to get you to reduce your Scope 3 emissions, you want to ensure that you're doing it in an efficient way. So understanding where those hotspots are and where to focus your effort on is going to help reduce the burden on your organization, and you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck ultimately. And then really that customer driver is is really creating the business case for doing this, because as each year goes by, more and more kind of the top tier customer levels are saying, you know, we need to build up our understanding of our scope 3 emissions, and you're a big part of that. So what have you got?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it also helps a lot with the data capture, understanding the systems and processes. It's a different lens on viewing the business processes. So again, it helps to strengthen a number of those other elements, the connections that takes place within the business, the data, and how we use that information to drive change, to get insights through.
Yeah, I mean, we're our data partner that we're working with. They've got a great ability to quickly create insights from high levels of information and data, and that's really one of the core parts of the outputs of the program. Is with mass participation, we're able to then glean metadata insights, which can then be used by the organizations to then engage from, you know, here's the insights from our individual data, but this is also how this compares to the metadata, and the kind of everyone working off the same hymn sheet approach, rather than organizations going it alone down one way and taking a different approach than another organization. So that's what we're really trying to do with this project.
Yeah. So it's really also about not necessarily talking about the challenges, but saying once we have this information, here's the value which comes from it. Here's the wonderful things that we can start to deliver and achieve once we've got this information. Yeah,
Absolutely.
fantastic. We've got a question also that's come through from Reed, talking about SMEs, VCEs, and third sector, and asking the question, how do we manage the conflict that exists between talking about SMEs, VCs, and also talking about a sustainable supply chain which has the governance systems and processes in place? How do we manage both of those two, what could sometimes be intractable different approaches to supply chain management? Brenda, do you want to pick that one up?
I'll start, but I very much like other people to jump into this as well. So, for me personally, the SMEs, as we all know, almost the whole world is SMEs when you look at percentages on this one. And it really does present this massive challenge into the supply chain engagement and working through this. We've already highlighted some of the specifics. So SMEs are almost we almost can't measure their data and their carbon on this one. And that's for a lot of reasons. A lot of them haven't started. They may not have the funding yet. And yet it's absolutely critical. Something simple like the SBTI says that you need to measure a specific part of your emissions. You need to engage with them, not simply your largest 10 suppliers, but you need 67% of the actual emissions. And if you don't know what your emissions are, then it's a hard place to start. And second of all, how are you going to engage with all of these particular people that may be small? So we find that you really do need to have some expert insight into what's going on in your supply chain as specific partners, so that you'll know whether they're likely to have very high carbon, even though it's a very low spend. So I would say get some help when you're profiling your suppliers on this one. And then once the engagement you're talking about is this education to the SMEs and the VCs as well, that's part of that challenge. Is they may be VC, but still have very high carbon. You need to look at different ways to partner with them differently. And it may be not just the education, but the financial side, and even start looking at medium-term and long-term partnerships with the same kinds of suppliers, so that you're really building that relationship together, and that you have that discovery together, but also can start to benefit from each other's expertise and working through data handling, etc.
Yeah, I think I mean, that's an interesting point, because SMEs can be great at kind of shifting towards niches, and really, if you're able to communicate with them what you need, and you're able to give them confidence that they're able to kind of if they're able to come up with solutions for this, then you're able to help support them with that because it's in your kind of mutual best interest. Then you should find that SMEs are quite willing to to take a punt if they have the confidence that there's kind of minimal kind of financial risk. I guess that's the key risk to get over is, are they able to take a punt on something? But if it's within their skill set, then SMEs should be entrepreneurial and they should be looking to come up with solutions based on what their customers need.
So it's very much about having that invested relationship between the various parties.
That's right.
Also
Yeah.
having a meaningful, so there's an intent of bringing in the SMEs for certain areas and certain activities. So it's a managed program and an invested
That's it.
relationship rather than it being short term and call off type
That's
basis.
right. Yeah. And obviously targeted, because an SME will have their niche and they want to stick within that side because they can't be too broad brush.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm conscious of time that we've gone over, and hopefully everyone can stay with us for a few minutes longer. I did want to pick up on just one further question from Martin, which I think is really pertinent as well to a lot of what we've spoken about, and the conversation about commercialization of the FM sector is very much predicated upon the data that we have and how we use that data. So Martin's question is the risk of data quality holding back reporting and decision making? And to what extent is this around skills, capability, and what's the other reasons for that? And what should we do to try and resolve it? I feel if we can answer this, we should also choose 6 numbers. But Chris, do you want to take a first go at this?
So the risk issue of data quality yes. So yes, data quality. What we're finding, I mean, from a relationship, if we're focusing on scope 3 emissions and data quality around scope 3.
Well, I think this is looking at everything as well. So it's not just that. You talk
Okay.
about social value, we talk about the well-being. So it's
Sure, yeah.
across the agenda.
So yeah, so then I mean, data quality is pertinent to making decisions on where you can find efficiencies and where you can make improvements. Because if companies are being pushed to manage risk and actually drive financial investment, which is going to mitigate certain risks, then it needs good quality data in order to actually stick its flag in the sand and say, yes, we're gonna make financial commitments towards this because we're data driven and we understand the evidence. So yeah, I would say that it is holding back reporting, and that's potentially a reason why we often find within kind of TCFD style risk reporting, there's a lack of actually committing to what the financial risks are of particular risks. Companies are quite happy to talk about what the risks are, but actually when they're starting to talk about the financial risk associated with it and what they're going to be actually committing to managing those financial risks, there's often an imbalance to that.
Yeah. So there's an element there about understanding the data itself. So what's the meaning of it? So what's the underpinning information that feeds into the decisions that are being made? And do you see that as being a capacity and the time that individuals have, or do you think that there's a deeper skills gap that actually FMs, and I don't believe this is just an FM issue. I think it's
not just
broader than that. I think it's an issue that we just don't really understand data. We just assume data is correct and accurate, and to be able to use it.
Yeah, and there's also the embedded nature of sustainability understanding across different teams, such as the risk team, the finance team, and such, who are then able to kind of continue to drive things forward. So this is getting better as each year goes by. I mean, within our assessments, we have conversations with the finance teams, and there's a stark difference between what a leader in the finance team understands about climate change and sustainability now than there would be 3 years ago. and again on the risk team. So it's a continuous improvement.
Okay, so it's
So
also very much the other departments that you're interrelating with. So
yeah,
naturally, some of your departments will have a much closer eye on the data. They'll ask the questions, and it's whether you're able to respond. But that's where the learning also comes from, self-learning within an organisation itself. So actually, engagement with your marketing department within your finance department really does help you as an FM to grow
Yeah.
and develop your own skill sets.
And I think that this points out that almost all of the examples we come up with are driven by good governance and by making changes in our ESG in that governance section. So, it's not just skills, it's having the right hardware and software, the right funding, the right financial commitment to that one. You need to have the right policies in cybersecurity. I mean, inside this year's, we've got data handling and cybersecurity in at least 3 different criteria because we see how it does go across the whole organization. So one of the places to start with that would be addressing it from that governance in the top level and then moving it down. So that really does drive so many other things. And tying it back to the other question about the SMEs, this is something we've talked about inside Aclaro and SFMI about that challenge, but also the opportunities that can turn around and some of the commercial opportunities for these sorts of partnerships and the way we're dealing with it. And the right data handling and absolutely data security actually starts to unlock a lot of those opportunities and absolutely across the whole business.
Yeah, fantastic. So actually there isn't a silver bullet to this at all. There is lots of small things that individuals, FM departments, but also organisations can do. I think we also need to realise this isn't just an FM problem. This is a problem across lots of other departments as well facing this. And so there is that collective development that's also needed. Yeah, fantastic. I'm just conscious of time, so we've gone a little bit over, and I'd like to draw this to a close. So first of all, for me, I can say thank you very much to Chris, Brenda, Kristen for your presentations and taking us through. Behind the curtain is Jemima, who's done a fantastic job in helping to put everything together, and also the reports. So a huge thank you to Jemima as well. Do go onto the website, download the reports, should be available. As Chris mentioned, it does touch upon Surface. There's a new style that we've approached this year as well, which I think makes it a lot better. As well, there's a lot more information that's included in as well, but also we've included a lot of examples, case studies around how organisations have developed and grown. So again, it gives you some thoughts and ideas which you can take back to your own businesses for what you can implement, but also that forward line, what the art of the possible is and how to grow and build out towards those as well. For the 2025 programme, we've got quite a few bits and pieces that we're looking to implement. I've mentioned about the 4 areas that we're going to start to build out in a little bit more detail: decarbonisation, social value, well-being, and the risk and opportunities areas, and start to get a much better understanding of that. So that's a collective approach to building those individuals out. And we're also looking at preparing an ambitions report. So looking at what the sector is going to look like 2025 to 2030. How do we build sustainability, and what does the future of the FM sector look like? And what do we need to do as a collective to be able to get there, both internally for ourselves, but also how do we have those conversations to organisations about the value which they place onto the FM sector as well. And then lastly, we're also looking at hosting our first face-to-face event as well. So I think it's a number of years since we last had face-to-face. So we're looking at hosting and holding an event just to talk through predominantly some of the outcomes that are coming around the ambitions and around the KPIs, and to start to get to grips with the details around that and how we move that forward. So thank you very much to everyone today. Again, Chris, Brenda, Kristen and Jemima for this year's reports and outputs. Thank you very much to everyone on the call for joining in, and to all of our partners as well. Have a wonderful Christmas, 'cause that's almost upon us as well. And I'll speak to you all in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.